Good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Katie Schauer, and I'm your host this morning for our webinar. You've joined us for AVEVA Monitor and Control InTouch 2020 Top 5 Features. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. We are recording today's session, and that will be available on our website later this week. We do have a webinar archive. If you go to, I believe it is under Resources, and then Recorded Webinars is listed there. We are also hoping to keep this at just about 30 minutes. We may run a few minutes over. We will answer all questions. You can enter those through the Q&A and chat boxes. We will do that at the end. If you are unable to stay on, we completely understand, but we will be sending you the recording later this week, and those questions will be answered in that recording. So once again, feel free to utilize the Q&A or chat box at any time during the presentation, and we will address those questions at the end. With that, I would like to welcome Brian Premock and Glenn Yancey. You're good to go, Brian.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Sorry about that. Hey, thanks for joining us for our next 30-minute installment of Learn in 30, where we're going to talk about the top 5 features of the new AVEVA InTouch 2020 SCADA software package. As Katie mentioned, my name is Brian Premock. I'm Director of Business Development. I work out of our corporate headquarters in Richmond, Virginia. I'm joined by Glenn Yancey, Technical System Consultant. Good morning, Glenn. Thanks for joining.
Good morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great today. Well, Glenn, you know, as we put this good. Hey, you know, as we put this together, I was like, how do we get the ball rolling here? And you know, I wrote this slide, and as I typed the words 2020, it kind of dawned on me. It kind of struck me that, you know, Wonderware as a brand and this venerable InTouch package have been around now for over 30 years. It's sort of hard to believe, actually. You know, if you go back in time and take a look at the screen on the left, you know, Wonderware back in 1987 was this really small private company with this vision to build the first all Windows-based HMI for personal computers that really ushered in a new era in the control world. And while the software has changed ownership over the years, I think their vision and their commitment to customers from the current product development team is now stronger in many ways than ever. And as I have been a part of this industry in parallel with them, I've been a part of the Wonderware family for 11 years through InSource. I've also sold and worked with many other SCADA packages in my career. You know, there's 2 things that I've always admired about Wonderware. First and foremost, they're always on the leading edge. They're always pushing, they're innovating, they're pioneering. And even today in 2020, as we start this new decade, they're challenging customers with regards to how they use information to optimize their performance. So in their mind, you've got to have the tool set to merge the information technology world with the operational technology world to be world-class. And we'll be hearing about that in today's session and the follow-up session we're going to do next week on System Platform. And then at the same time, while they're pioneering, they're always maintaining their commitment, which I think is sort of unparalleled in this industry, to the customers that have been on the journey with them. You know, the SCADA software itself really does nothing. It's what you build with it that matters. It's that application that you create that becomes an asset for your plant. That becomes the differentiator as you play the game and make the products that you make. And they have this very good track record of saying, even if you went back to 1987 and you had a version 1 InTouch, there is a migration path that they make available to you that would take it from the world of Windows, I think it's 3.0, Glenn, something like that, and allows you to migrate all the way up to InTouch 2020, which is the world of Windows 10 and Windows Server 2019, which is what InTouch 2020 is compatible with. So that's a great story to tell, because with, several other companies have really not been able to tell that story. They've had to rationalize products. And when that happens, it can be disruptive, and it can cost money to re-engineer a solution or an asset to go from one platform to the next. You know, I do this a lot. I'm blessed with the ability to go out and travel to customers. We have served to over 4,000 at InSource in our 23 years. And you know what? The first thing that customers ask me when I start talking to them is almost universal. who the heck is this AVEVA company? And what did you guys do with the name Wonderware? So let me deal with those head on. Let me start with AVEVA. If you've not been following along, and I don't blame you if you have, it's been quite a year, Schneider Electric purchased the industrial software business, including what was formerly known as Wonderware, from a company called Invensys back in 2014. They ran it, Schneider Electric ran it in their own group for a couple of years, but then in 2018, they did a merger of sorts and created this independent company called AVEVA, which is a pure play software technology company, whereas Schneider Electric arguably is a lot more hardware and services oriented. So this new company, AVEVA, actually has existed for a very long time. Their existing portfolio is primarily focused on engineering, design, and construction software. And what they did is they rolled in Wonderware and many other industrial software businesses and products that came from within the Schneider Electric portfolio. And over the last 2 years, it's been exciting to see this group and their strategic vision. And they've spent a lot of time leveraging, integrating all these products together and leveraging the full capabilities of the portfolio. And what I would say is this: their overall strategy is that they recognize that in today's industrial manufacturing world, you've really got to be successful and profitable along two axes. The horizontal axis is your asset lifecycle. Your vertical axis is your operations lifecycle. So to simplify that, what they're saying is, this asset lifecycle is everything you do from innovation and R&D to engineering to build the machines that do what you do, and to get them connected, make sure that you have a value stream, then to operate them effectively, making sure that you're tracking production, you understand when machines are up or down, and then staying ahead of the game for maintenance, being less reactive and more proactive so that you get this return on assets. The vertical axis is all about what you run on those assets. It's scheduling your production, scheduling all the SKUs, taking care of the changes that come along with customer requests. Then it's also monitoring and controlling them and optimizing the yield you get on all this equipment. And along the way, it's managing quality, compliance, making sure that you're keeping up with your customer requirements, and all at the same time. It's a closed loop. It's optimizing your processes to do these, continuously making changes and improvements. What's really unique about this combination of these two worlds, and especially what we're talking about today, is monitor and control sits right in the intersection of these two axes. And their vision at the very highest levels is to use that capability to take information that's going to maximize the ability for customers to achieve that in both dimensions. And then within the monitor and control segment, they're also taking this, what was a disparate group of companies, and they're weaving them together to tell a story. Now, they call this sub-strategy Edge to Enterprise. And essentially what they're telling the market and us, and we're trying to communicate to you, is that each of the different product lines that you may have purchased to get into the ecosystem of AVEVA has a place. So they're positioning AVEVA Edge down by the machine or down at the line, a very capable product. And I'll get to the name changes here in a second. I think this will become a little bit clearer. So we started down at the line with Edge. We progress upwards to the plant, where we position InTouch HMI. And I know from my own personal experience, we have thousands of customers just at InSource that use InTouch HMI and Historian as their plant-based SCADA, whether it's in the make area, whether it's in the pack area, or somewhere in between. It's been used in this manner for 3 decades. Complementing this is another plant-wide SCADA package called SciTech, and we'll talk a little bit about where that came from as well. Then they cross over into the control room, and then we introduce a product called System Platform. Now, System Platform is really just a marketing term. What it is a bundle of products that essentially form the foundation for what we call distributed SCADA. These products include Application Server, the Wonderware Historian, our IO servers or communication drivers, and the new HMI, which we now call Operations Management Interface. And the idea here is that these components work together to manage a SCADA system that's deployed across multiple assets, multiple plants. It's enterprise-wide. And it's all a single namespace, which is really important. Instead of just individual SCADA packages down here, you talk to one platform to get your answers or to connect to other systems that run your plant, like asset management systems or computerized maintenance management systems. And then all of this is complemented by the AVEVA cloud experience. Now, AVEVA has been working in the cloud for many years, over 5 as far as I know. And 2 things we'll talk about is AVEVA Insight, which started off as an online historian back in 2015 timeframe, but has now evolved into so much more. They're capable of running more of their portfolio in the cloud, which makes them well positioned to have a hybrid approach where you get your real-time information, which stays resident at your plant, and you get the less real-time information available for people to do work with it or operate with it or see it. And I know in this current time when we've been doing a lot of work from home, we've had dozens of customers deploy Insight as a rapid way for people to work remote and get information on the plant floor very securely. And then we have the Integration Studio, which is really a development environment in the cloud. It's a sandbox in which people can collaborate, build their applications, save common graphics, and then ultimately deploy their solutions back down to the plant. So the name change. So beginning in 2020, what they've said is that if you followed that progression of where their products fit from edge to enterprise, the AVEVA Edge product, the genesis of that, is actually a company called Intusoft. It's based on their Web Studio product. Now, Intusoft became part of the portfolio when Invensys acquired them in 2014. Moving further up the ladder, AVEVA Plant SCADA is the new name for what used to be called SciTech. SciTech was a Schneider Electric acquisition that dates back to about 2006. And then, of course, the AVEVA InTouch and the AVEVA System Platform, the only thing they've done is drop the Wonderware name, but the genesis of those products is Wonderware. And Wonderware launched InTouch 1987, 1988, and Wonderware launched the distributed SCADA platform in about 2003. And for this reason and those strategies, AVEVA and the monitoring control platform still retain the #1 market share worldwide, with total number of licenses estimated in the realm of about 2 million licenses. And they're deployed across hundreds of thousands of different sites. It's estimated, still estimated, that about 1 in every 3 plants has some type of Wonderware and now AVEVA monitoring and control software running in their plant. So if you're here today, you're in good company, and I want to thank you again for joining us. So with that, Glenn, let's get right to it. Let's talk about our top 5 new features for InTouch 2020. Why don't you take us away?
Sure thing.
All right, so let's bring us to number 5. Everything's been modernized. Tell us a little about the look and feel and what we get from the new 2020.
All right. So in InTouch HMI 2020, one of the things that has changed is both the user interface as well as the workflow in how you develop or import an application. So one of the things that we're going to see inside of the InTouch Application Manager is a new view to allow us to see previews of our application. Now, as a system integrator, we may be developing multiple applications, but when we just look at the name, it's kind of hard for us to tell which application is which. So the preview of what's called the tile view is going to allow us to see some thumbnails of each one of our applications. So that's one of the newer features that exist in 2020 for the InTouch Application Manager. But also what has changed is the workflow in how you create a new application or how you import an application. The creation of a new application has reduced the amount of steps that one would go through to say, this is the name of my application, this is the directory, it's all in one interface now, and you can even templatize your application. So if you have multiple applications that you're working on or that you're going to work on, but you wanted to maintain the same navigational feel and look and banners and so forth, we can create a template inside of the Application Manager now, and any new application that gets created can utilize that template. But what about importing an application? So let's go to the next slide if we could, please. So the process that exists now in 2020 is there's no modern application anymore. Everything is now just considered a standalone application. but we can still take the modern applications we've created in 2014 and in 2017 and convert that to a standalone application. Now, what does that mean, though? Well, we're not having to create an additional library, an additional database for our graphics. They're now native to an InTouch application, whereas before in 2017, the application may have been a little bit bulkier because of the database of graphics, but that's no longer the issue in 2020. So when we bring in and import an application to migrate to 2020, it will then give us the option to convert to a standalone, but still maintain our library of graphics and placing that into a much more modern file format than a database. All right, so next slide, please. So you're still going to have the same look and feel for Window Maker. Now, there's some newer features in there that have come along in 2017, such as the ability to take a pixel-based window and convert that to a vector-based window. That will be a little bit, actually will be quite important once we get into the web-based version of InTouch a little bit later on in this presentation. All right, so next slide, please.
Now, so that brings us to number 4. We have always known the word orchestra graphics, but that's changing, and now we call them industrial graphics. And Glenn, give us an update on what we can do with this.
Sure. So as Brian was mentioning, the word orchestra graphics has been synonymous with Wonderware System Platform. And in 2017, they slowly started to embed these graphics into InTouch through what was called a modern application. But now in 2020, we're saying that orchestra graphics have now been rebranded as industrial graphics, but this platform of graphics can then be shared across other products underneath the AVEVA brand, such as System Platform, OMI, InTouch, Insight, Edge, and SciTech SCADA, which is now going to be called Plant SCADA. So we're now creating a unified environment that we can create graphics and share those graphics as a standard in the form of a library that each one of our programs can utilize and download for use in their own application. Next slide, please. All right. So we're still going to be working with the same library of graphics, but as we mentioned before, and by the way, these features are all going to be piggybacking on top of each other. So you're going to see a little bit of overlap, but the concept of modern, as we discussed, goes away. Standalone applications now natively contain industrial graphics. And these industrial graphics will then be shared across multiple applications should we choose to do so. But one of the things, the next slide, please. One of the things that we'll end up seeing is a new concept called a widget. A widget can be utilized inside of our graphics. And we're still going to have the same elements and all the other things that our orchestra graphics had in the past with our industrial graphics. But these widgets will then be available to us to create on our own, and some that are pre-built in there to take advantage of the HTML5 environment. So one of the things we have is called a carousel widget. A carousel widget is going to act like a kiosk. So when you go to the mall and you see a map of where we're at, that display is constantly rotating through multiple windows, but you still have one display. The carousel widget allows us to supply multiple window names that can be used on a large screen, maybe a plasma, or maybe, I think I'm dating myself by saying the word plasma, but 4K monitors and HD monitors can now be utilized to show off these windows and rotate as visitors are coming in, or even operators are in a control room monitoring what is happening. So that's one of the newer cool features called a widget, and this one specifically called a carousel widget. So next slide, please.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. And that brings us to, once we go to industrial graphics, we can now leverage the cloud. So that's our number 3 feature. Walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So you're going to see a new button at the top right inside of Window Maker. And that new button is going to be called the AVEVA Cloud or AVEVA Connect button. And that button is going to allow us to sign in to a shared library in the cloud to take these graphics and port them up into a common centralized location that other programs can utilize under the AVEVA brand. But not only that, we can also take advantage of what's called the Integration Studio, which is our development environment in the cloud. So if we wanted to create a sandbox environment with our development licenses, we would then have that ability to create our own workplace in the cloud, work on our applications, export what we've created in the cloud, bring that back down here into our production environment. So next slide, please. So when we create a graphic, we typically create our elements and give it properties, animations, and those properties I mentioned before were called custom properties. They're just placeholders for tags that will end up referencing to drive the animation in these graphics. But, and we'll continue through the animation, then we can say, okay, let's save this. I want to utilize this in my AVEVA Edge application that is sitting out there connected directly to a machine that is kind of on its own. So I can develop once, create a standard, and then share that graphic across these applications, in this case, AVEVA Edge. So I really don't have to redevelop a screen that I've developed in InTouch. I can port that up to the cloud and then download that into my AVEVA Edge application, or even Insight, AVEVA OMI, SciTech, which is going to be called Plant SCADA. So we now have that great option in the cloud for us to centralize our standards of graphics. Next slide, please.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And once we get them, I think where you're going with this, and this brings us to our number 2 feature, once we go to industrial graphics and now we have the portability of the graphics and they're in the cloud, it brings us to something really cool. Web HMI. We have now native web capability in the InTouch 2020 release. And can you walk us through what that looks like, Glenn?
Sure. So 2017 had given us the Web HMI application, but at that point it was just read-only, and it only focused on specific graphics, specific orchestra graphics. Well, now we can take the entire application, as long as it's utilizing our industrial graphics, and place that into a web-based format for consumption through an HTML5 interface, such as Chrome or Firefox or Microsoft Edge. So with all that being said, we now have another option to display and interact with our application through a web browser. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits that come with InTouch Web are we don't have to have a remote desktop server to hand out sessions with the InTouch application in them. This option for InTouch Web is typically meant for more internal use inside of a facility or inside of a plant or inside of a network. But again, not having to deal with Microsoft CALs for remote desktop services, no longer having to even deal with a server-based operating system. We can even utilize a workstation, much like Windows 10, to be a web server. So even the web server that gets installed with InTouch is a very lightweight version that gets installed behind the scenes. You don't have to configure IIS to develop this web server. And we really don't even have to have IT involved, because a lot of this stuff is done for us. What we still have to do, though, is make sure that we have our security enabled so that can determine how we perform reads and writes in the application once we have HTML5 browser connecting to that application. So next slide, please. So the InTouch Web is now an option for us. We still have InTouch Access Anywhere. That is not going away. Access Anywhere has its purpose for connecting from outside of the plant inside. So right now we're going through a COVID-19 crisis where it's hard for us to get out. But having these options available to us will still allow us to connect into the plant. If we can't be there physically, we can remote in. So Access Anywhere still relies upon remote desktop services, and it can be read only or read write, still requiring a server-based operating system. However, the web client that we're mentioning right now does not require that. It's not so much of a true alternative to InTouch Access Anywhere, but for most parts it is. It's a lower footprint, typically meant for more internal use or maybe access through a VPN. But it just works with InTouch, the InTouch standard HMI, which can also be InTouch for System Platform. But in 2020, it can be read-write as well. And the mobile app that we see on the right of that takes advantage of the application we published for the web, and now makes it available for us to consume through a tablet or a phone, provided we have the Apple iOS operating system or the Android operating system for our remote devices. So as long as we can log in, we can acknowledge alarms and perform write-back capabilities to turn things on or off, change set points, and so forth. So let's look at a few things.
Yeah, I think we've got some demos coming up of these, right?
Absolutely.
There we go.
So exactly. So we can see how the application is now fully functional inside of a browser. We have our navigation on the left, we have our banners on the top, and then the body or the windows that we truly interact with to show our processes will then show up on the right. So it becomes more responsive inside of the web, and with our read-write capabilities, we can perform these acknowledgments and so forth. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll see what that may look like for acknowledging alarms. Now, also note that here in a browser format, even if we were to resize the browser, because we're using vector-based graphics for our industrial graphics, they automatically re-render themselves smoothly for a change in browser size. So it's more, think of it like a resolution neutral type of interface with these graphics. I can select my alarm screen, I can acknowledge that alarm, supply a comment, and then on the actual plant floor where I may be running a full-blown version of InTouch, I can see who acknowledged the alarm, the comment that they placed in there, and so forth.
That's cool.
Next slide, please. Now this shows us the great thing about having a phone to where we can connect into our InTouch application, consume it through a mobile device, acknowledge our alarms just like we had before. So it's the same experience, but now in a slightly smaller footprint of an iPhone or an Android phone, or maybe even viewing this through a tablet. So here we're showing acknowledging the alarm and
sorry about that,
and so forth. All right.
Yeah.
Next slide.
I went ahead on you on that, but you can see the functionality there on the phone app, and you can download that both from the Google Play Store and from Apple. And finally, that brings us to number one. Now this may be anticlimactic, but actually I talked about at the beginning that we have thousands of customers that run InTouch and Historian. And so this new release makes that integration even easier and tighter.
Right. So now for me, I'm a bit of a nerd. And I wouldn't be here if I wasn't a nerd, but I love databases. That's where I got my start. Now, in the past, when dealing with Wonderware, we had to import the InTouch application into the Historian, and sometimes that required us to go through maybe 9 or 10 steps. Now we don't have to worry about that in 2020. That has been streamlined for us as a workflow here. We can just check to enable storage to the Historian, which then says, here are the tags for the Historian. Let me go ahead and push them over to the Historian for you. So in other words, the import is happening for you behind the scenes. It's a silent import process where you really don't have to interact with the Historian and administer the Historian to that process. So once we enable the Historian server, we supply a node name, we supply a directory, and then go to the next screen, please. Then after that, we then choose the tags that we would like to have stored. So there's still a log data checkbox that we would select. So any tag that has that, once we go into Window Viewer, then the application starts to push those tags into the Historian. InTouch now becomes the acquisition system. The Historian becomes the storage system. And the next slide, please. And then we'll have our Historian client that acts as the retrieval mechanism, which Historian client can be embedded into your InTouch application. But the location of our tags will no longer be located in the IDaaS portion of our Historian server. They will actually be located under manual tags, the same location where System Platform places its tags. But our trend screens will now be able to utilize our InTouch tags from the manual tags, and then we add that to our screen, we set it to live view, and we can start to monitor the patterns that our tags are creating for us.
Yeah, Glenn, that's awesome. Hey, I think that wraps our technical component, but it's worth hanging on for another minute or two because there was one other commercial feature that I felt so strongly about that I added it, and we're just going to call it the bonus feature. And that bonus feature is the fact that InTouch has now gone unlimited. And let me explain this a little bit. I think when you go back in time to the 90s, even into the 2000s, the way that SCADA systems were metriced and priced were around the number of IO tags that you were accessing or the number of clients that you used. I think there's a recognition by the AVEVA team and myself and our team and our company as well that's changing. It may no longer fit in 2020. And so we're connecting to more IO than ever, and we need, as this latest pandemic has shown, the need to get the information out to more people than ever. So for that reason, AVEVA has now added to the traditional approach with InTouch HMI, which is selling the license which you take and install in your, perpetually, and that you run and operate, and ideally you put on a software maintenance agreement so that you can keep upgrading it. They've augmented that with 2 new tiers. The first new tier is called InTouch Unlimited Standard, and it's the first time that they've introduced InTouch as a service. So what that means is that if you subscribe to the service, you get all those unlimited clients that Glenn walked you through. You get the development environment, window maker, and you get maximum tags, which at this point right now is 60,000, but there's a roadmap for 2020 that's going to slowly increase the number of tags beyond 60K. I think the first increment will be 100K, and they'll continue to ramp that up. It'll also include IO drivers and redundancy. And like I said, you subscribe to that for your plant, your site on an annual basis, and that's about, for a 3-year commitment, about $21,000 a year. You can back that down to a 1-year commitment, which would be slightly more as you have to renew it annually, or you could even increase it to a 5-year commitment and the price goes down slightly more. And then above that is what we call the Pro tier. And the Pro tier is everything in the standard tier, including a 100,000K historian. So again, the historian just adds to it in the Pro tier, and you get the capabilities of both packages as a service, which you subscribe to. And that's in the realm of about $38,000 per year. To me, 3-year subscription, it's a very good value. And the reason I say that is because the whole model is starting to offer both the perpetual license that we've all known and loved, and this offering or technology as a service. They call it Flex. And the idea here is that those products like that are bought as credits. You buy a certain number of credits, you use the credits towards the offer, you get the services that come with it for a year, along with bonuses, like you get access to training, et cetera. And then you have control over it through a portal, so that if your needs change and evolve, you can add more credits to add more products, or you can even redeem products and say, we're no longer using that anymore, let me get those credits back and reapply them somewhere else. It's an exciting new way as we enter the new decade to both consume InTouch and also to access more of the AVEVA portfolio that I talked about early in the presentation. Well, folks, I'm sorry we went a few minutes over. I really do appreciate that you've taken the time to join us here. In fact, we talked about this as a 2-part series because there's so much to talk about with InTouch and System Platform. Glenn and I will be back again next Wednesday, same time, same bat channel, and we'll do a 30-minute update about System Platform 2020, our distributed SCADA platform offer. So please be sure to join us. You can register at our website, insource.solutions, or send us an email at communications@insourcess.com. Thanks again, and Katie, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Brian and Glenn. This was a great presentation. I think that we're seeing all these great new features coming, and with that Flex subscription, we're getting so much more out of it. We do have a couple questions, so if you guys want to hang on a minute and answer them, we are recording the session again. So just to let you know, if you do need to drop off, please feel free to do so. We will be sending that recording out to you. So
we love questions.
Absolutely. Our first question is a little bit of a clarification. You talked about the different softwares that AVEVA has under its belt, and one of those is SciTech. And the question is, SciTech is a SCADA software that I've used in wastewater treatment plants. Isn't it a conflict of interest with Wonderware?
No, not at all. They're owned by, it's the same product development team. In fact, we were just at a site, a water customer up in Maryland, and unfortunately, the engineering firm that's done a phenomenal job for them for a long time had basically told the client 2 things. Number one, that maybe it was it was a independent product. And unfortunately, they were also given misinformation that the SciTech product was going away. Nothing could be further than the truth. In fact, we brought our AVEVA water wastewater representative with us, and we showed them how the SciTech product that they own today, being part of the same portfolio, could be extended. So not many people know it, but the Wonderware historian now, there's a replacement program. That Wonderware the historian will be the historian used across the SCADA portfolio. And there's a very low-cost method to migrate from the SciTech historian to the Wonderware historian. Additionally, we showed them how the graphics that you saw, industrial graphics, now are shared across the platform. So you can, once you move to industrial graphics, you can deploy them on your InTouch nodes or your SciTech nodes. And you can always take a SciTech application and add to it system platforms so that you can move to some of this greater capability, such as Wonderware MES, a model-based approach to SCADA. So the two products are managed by the same team, and the commitment we've heard top to bottom is that the customers, whether they are using SciTech, whether they're using InTouch, or whether they're using system platform, are going to still have that commitment to their investment going forward to continue to use the platform and have access to the greater parts or the greater portions of the AVEVA platform overall portfolio going forward.
Great. All right, so our next question is about the historian. So understanding that the historian client can be integrated to InTouch, can the Insight client be embedded into InTouch?
Yes. So InTouch allows you to consume .NET Client, which there are .NET Client controls for a Microsoft web browser. So once that is embedded into InTouch, then you can utilize that to connect directly into Insight and have that as part of your HMI experience.
Great. All right, well, that looks like that's all of our questions for today. Again, everyone on the call, if you have any questions or you want to see more, you'd like a more in-depth demo, or you have questions about this or what's coming up next week, feel free to contact us. We have a contact us form on our website. You can use this email address as well, and we're happy to help you out. With that, I would like to say we hope to see you next week. It'll be next Wednesday, same time. And just be sure to register for that part too. They were separate registrations. With that, I'd like to thank Brian and Glenn for their presentation today, and we will see you guys next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone. See you again next week.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.